Rob Brydon, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks for having me.
I'm just going to do this. You just tried an Australian accent. How good is it? What have you got for us?
I reckon that I did a thing years ago called Human Remains, and in one of those I played an Australian guy who had a really deep voice. It was based on a guy, actually based on a palm reader who read my palm, and he looked at it for what seemed like an eternity. And then he said, I don't know what words you're allowed to use on you. I was going to change it. He went, golly gosh, he said. So I'll base it on that. I've always thought that I was okay at Australian accents because, of course, I adore Barry Humphries. So I was getting those Australian voices, not just Edna and Les, but his other characters as well, from a young age. But you will often find that the people who come from the specific place will go, no, not very good.
I can feel the entire audience as one.
Yeah.
We'll pass on the emails.
People do Welsh voices in films, and
Yes.
they're not bad. I think to the casual ear, they'd say, oh, it did a pretty good Welsh accent there. But if you are Welsh, you can tell.
You are here doing a tour that is a musical tour as well as talk and improvisations. Why are we still so surprised to see comedians? Why are we so surprised to see comedians sing?
Well, I'm glad you used the word surprised and not the word appalled.
I haven't seen the show, of course.
Yeah, give it time. yeah, by the interval. Well, this is an interesting thing. I think, and it's one of the reasons I put off doing a show like this for so long, because I think that when a comedian says, and now I'm going to sing, oh God, really, are you? All I can say in my defense, it's not good when you're defending a show, is it? All I can say in my defense
Welcome to Australia. Defend your show, sir.
what the hell are you? Was it Stallone that got arrested here that time because he had growth hormone or something when he came in? I'm having a similar experience. Wait a minute.
Yes.
You've got some songs. And if it wasn't Stallone, then I do apologise. Well, I've sort of sung all my life in starting off in school musicals, and then I started doing improv comedy. They'd be singing in that, and then I had radio shows, and I would do comic songs on that. Gavin and Stacey, Bryn sings, different shows. And I'd always wanted to do musical performance of some sort, a musical in the West End. But the problem is, I've kept on having children. So, and if you do a musical in the West End, you're out of the house all the time. And that's not good. So I couldn't do that. And then what happened with this was, as I say, very wary of ridicule, of criticism for doing it. But I would do a few guest spots for friends who had shows. And I was doing one in London, and there was a producer friend in the audience. And afterwards he said, you should do it. It was a sort of cabaret show. Richard Stilgoe's son. He said, you should do something like that. And I said, as I said to you, well, I've always wanted to, but I said, well, you sort it out, thinking that I'd thrown him off the
It would never
show.
happen.
And of course, he, like all good producers, he did. And here I am.
And here you are. Well, welcome. As you just said, you were always an entertainer. You were always performing at school, drama clubs. Obviously, you went to drama school. But your very big break, your first really big break, came somewhat late. It took a few years in your mid-30s, and that was Steve Coogan. But did you?
Well, he himself wasn't my big break. That makes it sound as if I created him.
Oh no! I take. Sorry, he spotted your talent.
He did, yes. He made it. He opened the doors. I'd started off in radio in Wales by chance, and that was fine. Then got let go of there. I'd moved to London, struggled for a while. We defaulted on the mortgage. We had to sell some of the furniture from the house, stuff like that. Then I started getting voiceover work, and things were fine. And that sated any kind of creative thirst I had for a while. But then, it's not enough just to be in a studio saying, "See in store for details." So
I can't imagine why.
it wasn't, but you know what? It was for a while. That's the most embarrassing thing. For a while, I thought, this is great. So I put a tape together of different characters, and one of them was Keith Barrett, who then went on to do Marion and Geoff and the Keith Barrett Show. And a few people saw that. Hugo Blick, who then went on to co-write, and he directed Marion and Geoff. But Steve Coogan, who was, still is, the biggest thing, and he saw it, and he liked it. And his company, which is now huge, had just started up. So the first shows that his company made were mine, were Marion and Geoff and Human Remains that I did with Julia Davis.
What is it that Steve Coogan saw?
I think he saw a kindred spirit to a degree. We're very similar in many ways, pretty much the same age, although he does like to point out that he's 4 or 5 months younger than me. We both started out doing voices, moved into character comedy. I know that what he loved about Marion and Geoff was its heart, its soul, its lack of cynicism. He loved that. That was something he came to a little bit later in his career. But because he started with that very edgy crowd of Armando Iannucci and Patrick Marber and those guys. There was choose my words now, there was a level of brilliant cynicism to what they did.
It was tough as well.
Yes. So he loved that. He bangs on about that to this day. He loved the heart.
In fact, your niceness is an important part of who you are, isn't it? People respond to it.
What can I say to that? Yes, my niceness is an important part of who I am.
Thank you very much indeed.
No, I know what you mean, and well, that's just my that's my character, which is not to say that I don't have off days. Well, perhaps not as nice, but yeah, I do try to be.
But in that humour too, in those shows that you're talking about, there is also there's a sad quality to it. Is that a British thing? Does it exist in the same degree outside of the UK?
It's a very me thing. I've always loved sort of tragedy within comedy. Alan Bennett. I love Alan Bennett. You know, he's a big influence. Big influence. You see it in there. Victoria Wood. You see this pathos is maybe a good word for it. You know,
Yes.
There's that in that. Barry Humphries. If you look at Sandy Stone, even when Edna talks about her mother being in a maximum security twilight home, or she talks about Norm, didn't she? Talks about Norm, the husband. He's in a maximum security twilight home. He can knit with his mouth. He's into oral socks. You know, stuff like that. There's great pathos.
Yes.
Even in something as that.
As hard as that.
Yeah.
That huge hit series that followed Gavin and Stacey, of course, it's built on superb comic writing. But again, in UK humour, it relies on regional humour. How much is that the bedrock of British humour? The ability for everyone to laugh at someone else around the British Isles?
I don't know if that's particularly British. I mean, that kind of question, I don't know to what extent I can give you a great answer for that, because I've never been that great at taking some bigger view and pronouncing on it. That's sort of not me. I can tell you how it seems to me. I mean, Gavin and Stacey, to me, first of all, as you said, the writing by Ruth and James is superb. It's superb. It's so economical. I love economy. I love not in a fiscal national sense.
You don't want to talk about economics.
No, I don't.
We can if you want.
I mean within scripts and
Yes.
stuff. You know, so great examples of economy would be Alan Bennett, would be sort of Jerry Seinfeld, not a word wasted, you know. And you can sound verbose and still have great economy. Frankie Howard, you know. So it starts with the writing. They were an incredible script. There was a quality to the Gavin and Stacey scripts that was rather soap opera-like in the way that they'd end on a cliffhanger. They moved the story along at such a blooming pace. but within a world of such beautifully realized characters. I always thought that literally any of the characters in Gavin and Stacey could probably sustain a show. Even the peripheral characters like that Julia did with Agent Scarborough, Pete and Dawn, well, they're fascinating. Dave Coaches. Then they got a hell of a cast. When I knew I was going to work with Alison Steadman, I mean, that was a huge thrill. Huge thrill. So that was just a once-in-a-lifetime project for me.
There's a particular scene in Gavin and Stacey. I was laughing so much, but it's the rape alarm. So for our show, I probably can't do that economically enough. But I was doing some...
that's interesting because I in every interview now with a comedian, at some point he or she will say, I don't know if you'll be able to do that now. And it's such a cliche now to say that. But one wonders about that scene, whether you might be told, oh, well, that's a little bit, what if some.
Well, let's just try it.
But comedy is a pressure valve, isn't it? That's how I see it.
So it's a very good point you make. I was watching, just before we sat down, the scene in which you are giving a rape alarm to your niece.
You've met me halfway on the rape alarm. At least have the decency to let me give you a demonstration. Because, I'll tell you this for nothing, if you come back Sunday raped and I showed you how to use it, I'll rest easy in my bed. You come back Sunday raped, the fault will lie solely at your door.
And
my brother's daughter, Trevor, God rest his soul.
Trevor, God rest his soul. Can you imagine a moment when that scene would be considered too strong?
It's possible. I don't know, but it's possible. Certainly, when we did it, I wouldn't have thought anybody could ever object to it. But I think now there could be some people.
Is there a problem if we take away the pressure valves that comedy is?
I think so, because comedy, if you look at a family, let's say grandma has died and everybody's very upset. At some point in the grieving process, somebody will make a humorous comment. And the grieving people will go,
nothing funnier than a funeral.
It's part of being human. It's such a basic human thing to want that pressure valve to go, we'll laugh, about it. You do wonder where that's going.
I was reading in preparation and I was very surprised to see how long you've been doing Would I Lie to You, which is an enormously popular show in Australia. How have they kept the comedic writing at such a high level for so long?
There's no right. The only writing is the writing of the lies, because those are written, but there is no writing in the traditional sense. There's the casting, so who they get in around David and Lee, but there's not writing in the traditional sense. It's sort of evolved. I mean, it's on the telly all the time, and I'll come across old episodes, and I think there was a period when I would do more, I would perform more in it. I don't think I do that as much now. I would sort of do more impressions. And now I'm slightly wary of that because it's like, oh, here he goes again. He's doing Ronnie Corbett again. But I was on in the hotel the other day when we were in Brisbane, and it's evolved. At its core, there's a great production team, and the three of us genuinely get on very well indeed. And we're all quite distinct, quite different, but we sort of give each other space. And I think that comes across.
You throw the bottom one away before you start eating them, or just when you get to the bottom one, you throw it away?
All right, here's the packet of biscuits, OK? Take the top off with the little bit of stringy kind of wrapping.
Which actually reveals sort of two or three
come away in it in a quite a satisfying motion.
Yes.
The third one is normally relatively unscathed by its experiences during transit.
Which are we talking about?
I take those, let me talk. I take them out.
It's almost surprising, actually, that when you took over, when you've got these two comic geniuses working together, that you can introduce a third comedian into that and not disrupt.
Comic genius, just comedian.
Comedian, we'll take
It's
the right
interesting.
comedian.
You've got two comic geniuses and then a comedian. That's
You have two comedians firing, and then you introduce a third, and you managed to make it
so
work.
you've not brought me up to comic genius.
Comic
you've just
genius.
demoted the
You
other
wait till
two
we
down
get to
to
the
comedians.
end. You wait till we get to the end. It's
Okay.
going to be a big
Yeah,
paean of
yeah.
praise to your comic geniusness. Anyway,
Yes.
you made three work.
Yeah,
I wondered when
yeah.
you first took over that role, because your predecessor was a much more muted role, that it would upset the balance of the comedy, but it just took off.
Well, Lee didn't think it would work. He's told me he thought that bringing an out-and-out comic,
Genius.
because Angus was primarily, Angus is an actor.
Yes.
And had, I don't think Angus had done, I hope I'm not wrong, had done out-and-out stand-up on stage. So Lee has told me that he thought, it was a mistake. But I'm, I say this myself, but I'm quite generous on the stage with other performers, I'm very happy to provide what in sport would be called an assist, which is where you are the guy that says, oh, that was an incredible goal. Yeah, but you see the assist, comes over. So I can do that. And I know, I'll throw things up in the air and I know, oh, this is something that David can score with, or this is something that Lee can score with, often at my cost, and that's fine. A certain number of them. We don't want that all the time.
Let's not go too far.
Yeah, exactly, within reason. But it just sort of worked. But it's developed over the years. If you look at those early ones, the show's changed. The show used to have all sorts of gimmicky rounds in it, where we'd play some videos and they'd have to. People forget now, but that was in it. But like the best ideas, I think most of the best ideas, they're very simple. And it just pares down, and it comes back to economy that we were talking about. Just pares it down, pares it down, pares it down. And now it's essentially just like a parlour game that you could play at home.
So the incredible rapid-fire humour of Lee Mack and David Mitchell too, but especially Lee Mack.
Lee is unrivaled.
It's not scripted.
No.
That's him.
No. Lee's the fastest person I know, and I know a lot of fast people. But he is astonishing. Astonishing, unrivaled.
The series and movies that are The Trip, I suppose you could almost call it a franchise with Steve Coogan, built around a travel narrative to fabulous places.
Yes.
It's a shame not to go to Sicily, though. I was looking forward to that for obvious reasons.
Well, you don't have to be in Sicily to do Impressions on The Godfather, do you?
I could do it anywhere, but there's something about Sicily,
He's going to stay with me for a while, if that's okay.
Who the hell are you?
I live in the Manhattan. No, I'm just laughing out of nervousness.
And, it looks like a jammy gig from the outside, but a lot of it is that showcase for the virtuosity, the vocal interplay between you and Steve Coogan. It's a very sophisticated concept, actually, in its tone. How much of it is improvised and how much is scripted?
The structure is scripted. So Michael Winterbottom, whose project it is, will decide where we're going, in the bigger sense and the specifics. Also the story. So in each one, for example, we've been in the footsteps of literary greats, whether it's Byron and Shelley, or then there was Don Quixote in the Spanish one, and I think the Odyssey for the Greek one, something else for Italy, I can't remember. Some people. Anyway, maybe that was
Byron.
That was Byron, wasn't it? Yeah, because he's swimming across the
lucky.
So he structures all that. And we'll say, talk about this, talk about that, and he'll script specific dialogue. I mean, sometimes in the past, I think we've sort of given the impression that we just rock up and create everything, which is not true at all. But the bits that people pick up on, those are improvised. So the riffs, you can probably tell, those are riffs. But then they sort of become written because we do each when the meals are done, we eat each course 3 times. So you'll have the starter, and we'll be doing things, and then you'll realise, well, that's a nice thing we did there, and then they'll reset the cameras, bring it in again, and you'll do it. So you finesse it. So you're sort of writing it on the hoof, which is really rewarding as a performer. And it's a tiny crew, so it's very. When we did those, I always felt like we were in a travelling band of travelling players from the old days. You know, it was a lovely, lovely thing to do in that sense, and doing it with Steve, who is as good as it gets. So it's like playing tennis with the best person. It was very rewarding.
You say in one of the scenes, or in fact, you say this about yourself, that you only do impressions of people you like.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I think initially because they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So I think there's a bit of that. I'm sort of wanting to pay tribute to the person. And perhaps in the past, before I would think about it and sort of analyse it, it was like I'd see, I don't know, Tom Jones. Oh, he's great, isn't he? I love Tom. Isn't he wonderful, you know? And you want to talk like him, you know? or an exaggerated version of him. And then what's interesting though in it is that there will be public figures of whom I am not particularly fond, but they've got fantastic voices. And sometimes I will hear myself, that was a lovely voice, but I don't want to spend time in their company, and I don't want to do anything to help them along the way.
So no politicians.
Well, there are politicians that I rather like, but it tends to be the ones I don't like that have the more interesting...
Have the great voices.
Voices, yeah. I'm not going to name any, but you may be able to guess, but there are some that are eminently doable. They have so many... And maybe that's why they become such great communicators. There are politicians on... I'm not really clued in on the Australian political scene, but certainly Britain and the United States, there are some fantastic communicators there whose voices are very easy to do.
In one of the scenes in the trip, you're talking with Steve Coogan, and you're talking about refining your impressions as people age. Now, I have to admit, I feel a lot like someone who's gone to an Elvis Costello concert and begged Elvis Costello to play Alison. But here I am, nonetheless.
What would you like?
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
Aging Michael Caine.
Well, he's just turned 90, hasn't he? It was his birthday party, I think it was yesterday. Well, I'd noticed, well, this kind of comes back to this, you're doing a musical tour. I think anybody who does voices has an inherent musicality to them because they'll hear stuff in the voice. And I do notice things in voices, and you can almost think that everybody does this. I remember there was a tennis coach I met once, and he sounded just like Gordon Ramsay to me. He had all the mannerisms, the sounds. And I said, well, people must tell you that all the time. He said, no one's ever mentioned it. But to me, it was like being with Gordon Ramsay. Michael Caine, well, I have a vague obsession with mortality and death, right? So, we're getting older. So I notice people aging. And I noticed the main were Michael Caine, Alan Bennett, Barry Gibb, their voices, McCartney, their voices changing. So for Michael Caine, here he goes again. It was in the 1960s, Michael's voice was up there, very, very high. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off, right? And then I said, over the years, the voice, and as you're saying it, you can slowly bring the voice down like that and get very, very breathy and slow until, shall I prepare the Batmobile, Master Bruce? And you see that in, McCartney was kind of up there, and then slowly, like all of us, it kind of comes down. And with Alan Bennett, did they show Talking Heads over here in the 80s, Oh, ma'am, it was up there, and it was that sort of voice, and then...
That's good.
Thanks very much. And then over the years, and also people begin to lose mobility around their mouth, and now when he's talking, it's very hard to know what he's saying, but it's Alan Bennett.
What was the origin of the Man?
Man in the Box?
Yep.
I was at home with nothing to do, and I was experimenting with my instrument. I was messing about just doing voices because I was thinking about ventriloquists for some reason. And I saw an interview the other day. Who was it? Some huge, brilliant actor. And he was doing Donald Duck. I can't do that. It was some huge American. I can't think of it. Anyway. And I was thinking about ventriloquists. And I was thinking, and they would do all this. And in the middle of doing it, all of a sudden I went, hi there, how you doing? Somebody get me out of here. And I went, oh my God, what's that? And there's a part, I remember years ago when I was a radio presenter, I interviewed Alexei Sale. And I said to him,
I should say, brilliant British comedian.
Indeed, Alexei Sale.
The young
Fantastic.
ones.
Groundbreaking, right?
Just for our audience.
Okay. And I said to him, are comedians, stand-up comedians in particular, are they smart? Are they intelligent? And he said, they are possessed of a rat-like cunning. And I've always remembered that. And that relates to this in as much as I did it, I went, oh, there's a thing. There's a thing. You know, you'll have an observation in your daily life and you'll go, oh, that's a thing. I can say that on stage. That's something that has a currency for me, that has a
material.
worth.
Nora Ephron. Everything is copy.
There we are. Well, yes, and I who am I to question Nora Ephron? But yeah, some of it is great copy. Some of it you think is copy, and it turns out it isn't. I've had bits where I thought, oh, that's good, and the audience doesn't agree, and you have to let it go. But there was this little voice, and I'm totally sincere when I say it is nothing more than a quirky, gimmicky trick. But the number of people...
Why do we love it so much? Why is it so popular?
I don't know, but the number of people, and intelligent people, smart people, who are delighted by it.
Where are you? Somebody get me out of here. Oh, my God, what are you doing down there? Hi there, how you doing? Great to see you.
It's nothing more than a gimmick.
What a great gimmick and a great point to end. Rob Brydon, comic genius. Thank you very much indeed.
You saved that. You knew you were going to use that at the end. That's very clever, very smart. And I stop it. Thank you very much.